When a game is created, countless hours of labor, thousands of ideas, dozens to hundreds of people's creative visions are formatted and compressed into a single computer file. The life experience of every person, from sound designer to texture artist, the programmers, the playtesters, even the business executives, are morphed together and burned onto a 120mm disc. In that process, is it possible that something else is created too? Something more ineffable that is imbued, a soul, an energy, a curse. Today we're going to be looking at a series of unfictional projects from the era of the CD-ROM, lost or otherwise rare, which contain something hidden within, something darker, and the stories behind the developers which led to these strange occurrences and eventually their near disappearance. Join me in exploring these accursed CD-ROMs.
Hello there, traveler. I have many magical items in my collection, but be warned, they can be dangerous. It's not for the weak of will. As you wish, adventurer.
Forbidden Solitaire is the latest game from Night Signal Entertainment, who previously released Home Safety Hotline, which I never made a main channel video about, but I was a big fan of when it came out. On the surface, it is a 90s solitaire puzzle game with a dark fantasy aesthetic. You enter the mystical Forbidden Dungeon, seeking the secret to eternal life that supposedly lies at the end of the many trials the dungeon holds. There's another layer to this story, however, that takes us to a more meta place. You play as William Roberta, who just recently discovered the Forbidden Solitaire disc at a thrift store. As you play the main game, your sister Emily digs into the game's past and sends you information about the strange circumstances surrounding its development, all while unsettling glitches begin permeating your playthrough. You log into your PC, disc already in the tray, to find your sister's reply to the news you found the game you both remember from your childhoods. Not from playing it, but your mother's insistence that you never did. Extremely jealous right now. Let's see what we've been missing all these years.
They say that there is a secret to defeating death. Somewhere beyond the Blood Rock Mountain and through the deadly valleys of Gravewood, there it lies. Known only by legend as the Forbidden Dungeon, it is said that any soul daring enough to plunge its depths may unlock the secret to immortality in the heart of its deepest chamber.
After a brief opening cutscene, the tutorial shows you the basics of the game as you unlock the door to the first level of your trials, the Spade Dungeon. The game mechanics are pretty simple at first, selecting cards from the tableau, either counting up or down, chaining them together for combos until you clear all the cards, trying to avoid running out of options in your deck. You know, solitaire. Unlocking the door goes smoothly, and you enter the Forbidden Dungeon. Upon first entrance, something already seems amiss. A strange figure appears, shuddering in front of you before disappearing. No note of this is made by the game itself, seemingly some kind of odd glitch. Tentatively exploring the darkened halls, you find a grotesque character impaled into a wall with a spear, crying out. However, when you successfully free this poor soul, it slumps to the ground and attacks you. And here you enter your first battle. Battles work similarly to your regular puzzles, with your combos working as attacks, and enemies taking turns to either attack you themselves or apply some kind of effect to the cards. This being our first battle, we vanquish our enemy quite quickly, and upon its defeat, a disembodied eye peeking from a small opening in the dungeon's wall beckons you over.
Over here.
This is the shop, where you can use the money you earn from winning battles or solving puzzles to unlock things like specialty Joker cards, or purchase upgrades in the form of gemstones which are violently implanted into your hand. Meanwhile, in the real world, your sister tells you that she's going to try and find a copy to play for herself, hoping to find a disc image on some abandonware site or internet archive. Surely it can't be that hard to find, right? Losing yourself in the halls of the dungeon for the first of what will be many times, the puzzles begin to get a little more complicated, introducing locked cards which can only be opened with a key hidden somewhere in the pile, and secrets which are uncovered by clearing certain areas of the tableau. Similarly lost in her own search, Emily can't seem to find a copy of Forbidden Solitaire anywhere online. It is rare now, due to the activism of various parent groups during the time of its release, who argued it was too violent, eventually succeeding in getting the game banned. Emily suggests you rip the disc and upload it to Preserve Gaming History, and sends you a news clip from the time about the controversy. Interviews with some of the parents protesting outside the Heartblade Interactive building, who were the developers of the game. It's a pretty funny interaction, and for the time being there doesn't seem to have been much more to the controversy other than it's too violent.
There's no reason for it to be this violent. It's fucking Solitaire!
We also find out that former fantasy author Lucas B. Hart is heading Heartblade Interactive, previously writing the hit book series The Drake Flame Chronicles. Forging ahead, a secret door opens to a corridor full of skulls. After clearing the dusty corpses away, you hear something approaching behind. The poor soul we defeated earlier has come back from the dead, skin sloughing off but still seemingly more powerful than before. Rushing down the hall, we find the locked door to the next level of the Forbidden Dungeon, the Heart Dungeon. With nowhere else to go, we turn to fight this zombie creature once again, which has now absorbed the scattered bones from the hall to gain even more power. Your sister, annoyed that you're ignoring her texts, sends you an old ad for the game. I may not agree with the goals of these parent groups, but they seem to be correct in their assessment of the game's main selling point being the violence. Case in point, in order to defeat this creature once and for all, you rip out its heart with your bare hands and investigate the magic that seems to be at the source of its being. Inside the heart, you find a key that unlocks the Heart Dungeon. Very fitting. Emily provides a snippet of a review of the game from an old magazine. The reviewer is unimpressed. 4 out of 10. Despite featuring some stunning visuals, this late-game boss kept appearing before it was seemingly supposed to, causing them to lose the game. I wonder if that's the same figure that appeared briefly when we entered the Spade Dungeon. Though the critic dismisses the hysteria around Forbidden Solitaire, they still find it to be a pretty poorly put together game anyway. But Emily keeps digging and uncovers a police report that was somehow swept under the rug during this whole controversy. One of the developers, Shannon Sierra, committed during the game's development. She sends you a copy of the report, showing an image of Shannon with 2 ritualistic-looking blades gouged into her eyes. She died after breaking into the dev offices, her body found nearby a CD-ROM. Something darker, something hidden, seems to be surrounding this game's development, and much like our character in-game, we can only find the answers we're looking for by going deeper. You enter the Heart Dungeon, awash in red light and surrounded by cages. Almost immediately upon stepping foot inside, something massive knocks you unconscious from behind. You dream of the shopkeep, that floating eye in darkness, which is suddenly overtaken by this jester figure, like the Joker in a deck of cards, the one we saw at the start of the game, glitching over what seemed to have been planned for this segment. Its text is too corrupted to make anything out except the word die. Entering our first of many battles with this anomaly, it's equipped with strange abilities made of glitched text which corrupt our cards. Upon defeating this mysterious figure, you awaken, lying on the cold floor of a cell, the dead body of the previous inhabitant, your only company. Meanwhile, Emily has unearthed a clip from a television show called Truth or Tale. Clearly this universe's play on the show Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, starring Jonathan Frakes.
Can you remember the tallest man you've ever seen?
An episode covering the death of Timothy Garriott, a boy who purchased a copy of Forbidden Solitaire and was found dead at his computer, missing his eyes. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle. His mother believes it was the game. As an aside, much like their previous game Home Safety Hotline, the FMV and character acting in this game is just so great. It's always a perfect mix of hokey and kind of spooky. Archelaus B. Crisanto does such a good job capturing Jonathan Frakes' vibe. It's super fun. Searching the cold body before you, you discover a key, though it doesn't unlock your cell. For that, you'll need to pry it open by force, all while evading the eye of the hulking warden of this prison, a massive creature that stomps through its halls. This is one of my favorite mechanics in the game, and it goes to show that even with such a simple premise as a base, there are ways to modify and add to the main gameplay loop in interesting ways. Its cone of vision moves across the tableau, and if you clear or otherwise interact with with these portions too many times, it will discover you. Fleeing your cell and ducking into a crawl space, you just barely escape the grip of the creature as it reaches into the tunnel after you. All the while, Emily continues sending you supposed victims of the game, all dying at their computers under mysterious circumstances, missing their eyes. And we get another peek into the real world surrounding the game's development when audio begins to play as you scramble through the tunnels.
Hey, thank you for meeting with us at Heartblade today.
This doesn't seem to be something the developers added intentionally, and the source of the audio is unknown. In fact, it seems utterly strange that the events that unfold within would have ever been recorded in the first place. This is something that's definitely supernatural in some way. The history of the game's creation imbued into the ones and zeros. We hear a portion of Shannon Sierra's job interview at Heartblade Interactive with Lucas B. Hart. Shannon is a new graduate with an impressive resume of work during her college career and is clearly excited to work at Heartblade. When she says making games for people to enjoy
feels kind of like magic, you know?
Lucas seems to relate to this sentiment on a deep level, coming across as almost too excited.
Yes. Yes. Magic! That's the perfect word for it.
He's clearly a very eccentric individual. He even says,
The kind of games we're making here, they're not for the faint-hearted, you know?
There's an almost ominous undertone to his comments, like they're working on something more supernatural than a simple video game. Emily continues her research, discovering that the symbols on the ritualistic daggers from Shannon's death are tied to a cult called the Keepers. This symbol specifically is the captured eye. The writing shared in this snippet is hard to make out, but we can see that it has something to do with soul trapping, a game, and ambrosia maybe? Clambering out from the tunnels, you find a stairwell spiraling deeper into the dungeon. Rushing down the stairs, you find a locked trap door to the next level of your trial, tangled in vines. After once again evading the massive guardian of the Heart Dungeon, you clear away the thicket of thorny vines and enter your next trial. The Club Dungeon is an expansive underground hedge maze of lush greenery, which is predictably very easy to get lost within. Meanwhile, Emily sends along a news clip which covers Heartblade Interactive, featuring an interview with Lucas B. Hart.
You may know him as the creative mind behind the best-selling Drake Flame Chronicles novels your kids are reading on the playground. Now, book author Lucas B. Hart has started the new technology company, Heartblade Interactive.
Its main focus is on the studio's development of an expansive open-world fantasy game based on his book series, The Drake Flame Chronicles. There's a good amount of humor here, and Lucas B. Hart's ambitions seem to have been absolutely mammoth, maybe even impossible for the time.
I mean it when I say that you can literally do anything. You can assassinate the mayor, wear a glamour of his body, and then take his family for your own and raise it until you crown your son as the next heir of your inheritance. It's truly groundbreaking.
Very reminiscent of a Todd Howard figure, and the many promises of Bethesda, making massive claims they often were not able to live up to.
It just works.
His eccentricity and ambitions for an endless, seamless way to live these stories paints a picture of an intensely creative mind that craves the most immersive way to live in a fantasy, without any kind of grounded connection to the reality of game development. Emily wonders why the team pivoted to a simple solitaire game instead. As you continue to explore this maze, the bushes around you almost seem to invite you to rest against them, sinking into the soft leaves until you realize they're dragging you to your death, snapping you back to reality and beginning another fight. Upon wrestling your way out of the death grip of the vines, you aren't given much time to breathe as the ceiling begins to cave in, and then, bursting through, is the beast from the Heart Dungeon. When you are finally able to successfully defeat this beast, its body is pulled into the bushes. A fate that could have been yours only moments ago. Moving ahead, you begin to hear more audio from the past between Lucas and Shannon. Shannon tries to impress on Lucas that the team does not have the time or money to finish the Drake Flame Chronicles game as it is. They'll have to compromise on something.
If we continue our current course, we're not going to make a December launch. That's just the reality of it.
Lucas refuses with a level of unrivaled toxic positivity.
So we're just gonna give up. Hell no. Fighting spirit, Shannon! Summon it within you!
Additionally, Emily does a little more digging on Shannon specifically. Her family lineage ties back to the founding members of the Keepers, and her father was even a practicing member. Coming upon a shimmering lake, you have no other clear choice but to swim across, and you'd have almost succeeded unscathed were it not for the massive sea serpent that emerges, embroiling you in yet another battle for survival. As you fend off your foe, more audio of Shannon and Lucas begins to play, and it becomes clear just how disconnected Lucas is with the morale of the team.
Hey, Shannon Bobannon? How's spell system coming along?
It's getting there. It's still going way over the memory limits.
Shannon is clearly overworked, underpaid, and running against an impossible deadline. However, what Lucas does notice is something on Shannon's desk, something called Forbidden Solitaire.
Sounds gnarly. Where'd this come from?
Put that down!
Oh, got it. Got it. Sorry, not touching.
It's nothing to worry about. I just like to keep it close.
Something very odd is going on with Shannon, and Emily continues her research. The Keepers were founded in the 12th century, known for collecting demonic artifacts and passing them down generation to generation. What is Shannon up to? You manage to escape the clutches of the serpent, but that doesn't quite mean you've beaten it. It appears it's poisoned you, but before you can come up with a remedy of some kind, the Jester returns. Its message to us becoming only slightly more clear. You die. Faced with another difficult battle where our cards are corrupted and the game's rules are turned on their head as the Jester glitches the game. Even after fending off another of the Jester's onslaughts, you're still weakening from the poison. You wander until you come across some kind of small apothecary, the witch who inhabits it with her back turned to you. Sneaking behind her as quietly as you can, you begin concocting an antidote. As you mix your potion in the bubbling cauldron, what do you know? Even more audio from the past plays, this time Lucas B. Hart addressing the dev team as a whole. Even his normal beaming positivity seems soured.
The company is in bad shape. We've missed a few milestones, more than a few, in fact. We blew past Christmas. The guys at FutureSoft are a bit upset, and things are looking a bit dire.
When Shannon presses him, he reveals that FutureSoft, the publisher, hasn't agreed to extend their timeline or budget, and he's eventually forced to admit that nobody will be getting paid this month.
There's a lot of ways to be paid. There's the value of a hard day's work. There's experience, there's exposure, your name in lights.
The crowd erupts into chaos. Additionally, Emily sends you a fairly telling diagram of a particular 12th century occult ritual attributed to Acorn Wilt, founder of the Keepers and a direct ancestor of Shannon Sierra. It involves gouging out your own eyes in order to tie your soul to an inanimate object. And what's more, she also discovers information about an ancient demonic deck of cards called the Forbidden Game, which contains the soul of a demon called Balor. Supposedly, if you win the game, you die. After healing your wound and a brief encounter with the witch, you are able to duck through a nearby door into the Diamond Dungeon. This penultimate trial takes the form of an abandoned gem mine, massive jewels twinkling around us in the dimly lit stone tunnels. A group of cultists chant in the corner, which we avoid for now, instead peeking into a small shack where we find another poor soul tied to a table. Moving to free them, are we sure that's a good idea after last time? The Jester appears again, this time with another corrupted message. Running out of. After defeating the Jester yet again, you unbind the man, but are unable to save him. As the chanting of the cultists outside grows louder, sparkling crystals explode out of his body and attack. There is simply no break from the fighting. Upon conquering this new threat, we find that it leaves behind a powerful spine-like crystal staff. In order to use it, you must first bind it to your soul. It's probably worth noting the staff has an eye that stares you down while you complete this puzzle. Meanwhile, more audio of Lucas and Shannon plays. Lucas tries to pitch Shannon on the idea that the company published Forbidden Solitaire as a kind of buffer, a project that could save the team from bankruptcy or mass layoffs. But Shannon steadfastly rejects this.
I know how you feel. It's scary to be put in the spotlight. I remember when my first book...
The answer is no, Lucas. No.
Emily shares even more information she's found about Balor and the Forbidden Game. This demon was a game master, promising eternal life if you won the game. In an ironic twist, you are given that eternal life by trapping your soul inside the cards. The demon was defeated when the wizard was able to trap it inside its own cards. And in fact, this 90s PC game isn't the first video game manifestation of the Forbidden Game. A mysterious arcade cabinet was rumored to exist in the late 70s and early 80s, killing the player if they ever reached the end. Very Polybius. With all of this new information, Emily begins feeling a bit uneasy. You, aren't still playing the game right now, are you? With a newfound sense of power granted by this staff, you take on the cultists and defeat them easily. Then their leader, a little less easily, and then this crystalline form emerges. And upon its defeat, it begins to glow, blindingly bright, then darkness. You are in a celestial void, shimmering water expanding out as a sky full of stars and planets expands above you. A large crystal guardian blocks your path, which you, of course, must defeat to move forward. And I absolutely adore its design. Give me more rock creatures. And as you do, the final confrontation between Shannon and Lucas plays. Lucas reveals that the company technically has the rights to anything she's made while working for them. It's right there in the contract. So they're going to take Forbidden Solitaire and publish it against her wishes.
What? I told you no!
Right. But your contract with us states that the company owns anything you create while under employment here.
Lucas says he's doing what's best for the team, but Shannon insists, desperate, that it isn't hers. She didn't make it.
You said it was a side project of yours.
You said that!
I see. Oh. Are you going to make me pull out security footage, Shannon?
She's fired and escorted off the premises by security. A clearer picture of what happened is beginning to take form, and the Jester begins looking less like an enemy when it appears and warns you to stop playing. Further into that celestial void, you find what seems to be the lock to the key that is the staff. A crystal pedestal standing like a monolith in the reflective pool. Some strange cosmic entity emerges from the waters, and though you battle it multiple times, in the end, its inky blood spills out and encompasses you in darkness. When you can finally see again, there is a door in that darkness, and behind it, a dim castle hall. In the final step of your journey, you are faced with a gauntlet of boss fights in this large throne room. Statues of the royal cards, the Jack, Queen, and King. As you enter the castle, you hear yet more audio, this time between Shannon and a lawyer. The lawyer says she can get Shannon's name removed from the credits, but there is no path to stop the game from being released. Shannon decides she'll have to take matters into her own hands. All the while, Emily continues to get more concerned, asking you to stop playing the game multiple times. And then, you receive a message from someone new. An unknown contact sends you a trailer for the game. Now, this trailer is absolutely so fun. I love everything about it, from the music to the wizard costume.
You may be brave. You may be powerful. But if you enter this dungeon, you will not survive.
But at the very end, it begins to stutter, and some kind of face appears in the final frames. Emily tries one more time to stop you from playing before you lose connection entirely. You face each statue one by one in ascending order, each incorporating abilities and elements you've played against throughout the game. Upon each one's defeat, you collect their gemstone eyes, which you'll use to fill the crown at the end of the throne room. The final boss is the Jester, the Joker, the same figure as the Glitch. And for some reason, this battle is easy. Very easy. But the Joker has another trick up its sleeve. It warns you again, now clearer than ever, that this is Shannon speaking to us through the game, and overtakes the game entirely. It really begins breaking down now, the puzzle simply titled String Not Found, Cards Missing Textures. Meanwhile, the final piece of audio from the past plays. Shannon breaks into the Heartblade Interactive offices in an attempt to steal the Forbidden Solitaire disc, but it isn't long before security catches her and locks her in the room as they wait for the police.
It's Shannon. She broke in.
Shit!
With no other choice, Shannon performs the binding ritual, the one we read about before, sacrificing herself in order to sabotage other players from ever finishing the game. Even after we complete this puzzle, the jester, Shannon, is not ready to give up. The next battle with her is impossible to win. It seems she's succeeded, until we look to the shop. Something new has appeared. Cease thy meddling. A gem with an eye symbol, allowing you to beat her in a fair fight. A gift from some unknown force. You get another message from Emily, though one must suspect it's not really from her. Finish the game. You implant the gems into the crown, and then... the game crashes. Blue screen. And then, appearing in your screen is a familiar face, or at least a piece of it is familiar. That eye from the shop. It's Balor, revealing his true form. He's been helping you along the whole time, offering upgrades and special Joker cards to ensure you'd make it this far. And as is described in the ancient version of the game, he offers you eternal life, the reward for completing his game. And you are given two options: accept or decline. If you decide to decline his offer, Balor will continue giving you chances to change your mind. Surely you're insane to turn down such a generous gift. But if you stand firm in your decision, you are taken to a final boss fight, battled on the tableau of your crashed computer screen. Much like Shannon, Balor doesn't necessarily play fair, sabotaging cards and glitching game elements, but even still, he is bound to the rules of the game in which he is trapped. There has to be a way to win against him. And you can. Upon Balor's defeat, he cries that you have ruined his vision, and then... victory. Roll credits. At the very end, you're taken back to the desktop. Connection restored. Emily, panicked, asks if you're okay. And being the shitty brother that you are, you simply respond, long story, I'll tell you about it later. And so ends the tale of Forbidden Solitaire.
Hail and well met! It is I, a different wizard than the one from before, and I am here to inform you that the final issue for the Adventure Zone Balance graphic novel series Story and Song comes out on July 14th. Now, you guys know me, typically I don't do sponsorships on videos, but I've happily made an exception here because I have been a massive fan of the Adventure Zone since the podcast first began. Legitimately, the episodes and music got me through high school, specifically Balance, so having them reach out was such an utterly surprising and cool opportunity. Written by Clint, Justin, Travis, and Griffin McElroy, and illustrated by Carrie Peach, Story and Song is the 7th and final volume of the Adventure Zone Balance series, which is the graphic novel adaptation of the original actual play TTRPG podcast. And to be completely honest here for a second, they were kind enough to let me read an advanced copy of this thing, and it flooded back so many cool memories of listening to the podcast back in the day. It's truly a great adaptation for newcomers or, old fans like me. And there's a bunch of different types of bonuses available if you pre-order a copy. Barnes & Noble has an exclusive edition that includes exclusive character trading card packs. The Books A Million exclusive edition includes a poster designed by Carrie Peach. And indie booksellers Joseph Beth, Bookshop Santa Cruz, and Left Bank Books will have signed copies available for pre-orders. And anyone in the US and Canada can submit their pre-order receipt at theadventurezonecomic.com for an exclusive pack of postcards and a sticker designed by Carrie Peach, no matter where they pre-ordered the book from. There's also going to be a live book launch event on Thursday, July 16th at the Chevalier Theater in Boston, hosted by Brookline Booksmith. You can come see the team do a couple readings and talk about the final book and the series as a whole, and tickets include a signed copy of the graphic novel. Thanks so much for the team behind the Adventure Zone for reaching out and sponsoring this video. And remember, you can get the tickets for the live event and pre-order the Adventure Zone Story and Song at theadventurezonecomic.com. Coming out July 14th. Your first challenge is complete, but if it's deeper meaning that you seek, you will have to look a little deep. I don't know why I'm rhyming right now. I wasn't doing that 20 minutes ago.
Now there is, of course, another ending, but I'll leave that up to you to discover for yourself. I am such a big fan of this game, for many reasons. I adore the 90s pre-rendered visual style. I'm always looking for these playable unfiction experiences where the game itself exists in its own universe with secrets to explore, the hokey silliness combined with legitimately great horror design, and finally, the Solitaire gameplay is actually just really fun. Night Signal Entertainment partnered with Grey Alien Games, which I guess have made a bunch of other Solitaire games before, so it's genuinely fun and has more depth than I was expecting going into it. It is most definitely worth playing for yourself, but one of the things I noticed upon my second playthrough is that despite the silly B-movie plot, there's actually a lot more depth to the themes of the game when you start digging below the surface. For instance, the game's focus on the occult. Not only does it tie both pieces of the game together, the inner game and meta story both containing magic and wizards and the like, it also seems uniquely suited to one of the undercurrents of the game's story, the satanic panic, video game violence, and censorship. This plot point about parent groups isn't explained in much detail other than that people were upset about the violence, which was definitely a massively contentious issue in the 90s with the likes of Mortal Kombat, Doom, and the founding of the ESRB. The game's themes of dark fantasy, esoteric rituals, and monstrous creatures brings to mind the slightly earlier controversy of the Satanic Panic, which targeted things like Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of mainstream music, but also a lot of the alt music scene,
and listening exclusively to heavy metal rock music, a chalice or goblet,
and generally anyone who fell outside of a very narrow view of proper conservative Christianity in America. And though it was kind of for the best that this particular game was banned from store shelves, being that there's an actual deadly curse attached to it and all, it illustrates one of the many lasting dangers of a widespread moral panic, and that is the loss of creative works that are deemed not appropriate to whatever powers that be. Alternative art is already at a disadvantage when it comes to archivism, especially in the days before the widespread internet, often with only local or limited distribution. The conceit with Forbidden Solitaire, however, is that it probably should be destroyed because it keeps killing people who play it. But that's kind of the twist of the project's whole concept. What if they were actually right? Another overarching theme the game focuses on, perhaps the most overt one, is its commentary on the video game industry and how companies treat their developers. Of course, there's the direct plot points that illustrate this. The team is overworked and given impossible deadlines. Lucas B. Hart attempts to convince the developers to work without pay and uses an exploitative contract to steal Shannon's game in order to save his own ass. But there's a little bit more depth than just that. I couldn't help but be reminded of that moment that circulates around the gaming community every once in a while from the Double Fine Psych Odyssey documentary. During Double Fine's acquisition by Microsoft, Matt Booty comes in and basically tells everyone, hey, you've all got non-compete clauses now, so... And look, that's not particularly unusual for a large publishing company, but getting to see behind the closed doors how the devs react to this is kind of brutal.
The reality is that once something is kind of in these walls, Double Fine owns it, right?
And I can't help but think this game is at least alluding to that with many of these sequences with Lucas B. Hart. That particular episode of the documentary also focuses on crunch time within the company. The story of Forbidden Solitaire seems just as much about the slow death of creativity and passion that smaller developers are subject to as they work in the larger industry, as we see with Shannon's arc, as it is about an ancient curse. And this is made all the more clear when you realize that Lucas B. Hart is portrayed by Zalaver Nelson Jr., game dev and studio head of Strange Scaffold, which has released just a mountain of games, but more specifically, Zalaver Nelson Jr. has been an outspoken advocate for changing the way game development is done to reduce crunch time and create healthier development cycles for people making the games. When you see the kind of work he makes and what he has to say about this topic, it becomes clear how ingrained this critique of the games industry is within Forbidden Solitaire. More than just a comment on the industry though, I think this project explores the nature of creativity in general, in a very interesting way. Lucas B. Hart is not really a game developer, he's an author, working in a medium where you can, technically, make basically anything happen within your story. He has this kind of boundless creativity, an obsession with bringing fantasy to life in making magic real, and it's not particularly constructive. He is ungrounded from the reality he places on his developers, like a corporate exec making demands of people when they have no idea how to do the jobs of the people they're in charge of. He's a king of hearts, crown and all, the lead on the project, brimming with passion, but he's not able to really hone it into something productive. And I think it speaks to a very relatable struggle with creativity. When you're so full of ideas and inspiration, the scope of your project's ever expanding. But if you're unable to execute on them, you can't translate what's in your head into the thing in the real world. I mean, that's the story of my creative life, at least a little bit. I have countless pages of concepts, and very few of those ever see the light of day. Because creativity is often not the hardest part. It's developing the skills to bring it to reality that is, for many, the hardest part. And at least for me, there's a sense of loss that comes from knowing that so many of these pursuits, so much of the art that spills from my brain may never see the light of day, may never exist as anything other than a memory of an idea, before with time it is entirely lost.
Traveler, you are still not satisfied. Well, there is one more disc I can provide, but... wow, I'm rhyming again, but anyway, we'll have to fetch it yourself, however. It is in the Dungeon of Darkness, beneath that trap door. Be careful.
Frontiers of the Mind is a multimedia unfiction experience from the mind of creator Alt236 under the pseudonym -1 Publishing. The premise is as follows. From the late 80s to the mid-90s, the production company Third Eye Pictures produced a TV show called Maze Masters for the British network 7. Aimed at a younger audience, it was part reality show, part role-playing game, where a group of teenage contestants were trapped in a castle, solving puzzles and overcoming challenges to progress through different rooms in order to escape. One contestant would wear a large helmet that cut off their senses, while the others would watch from another room. The idea being they would help the blind contestant navigate the rooms and escape. However, strange things began happening behind the scenes, from apparitions cited by cast and crew to the unusual background of the primary showrunner known as Jay, all of which came out after the show's end and that this multimedia CD-ROM investigates. Because this story is filled with rumors and unconfirmed claims, the names and faces have been altered for anonymity. These digital alterations leaving every person in these screenshots with uncanny morphing faces, making everything feel a whole lot more eerie. The disc is separated into various categories where you can learn about different elements of the show individually, and inside those are often even more subcategories. Going through it in fairly linear order, the story slowly reveals itself, starting with the players. The casting of the contestants was, for the most part, fairly standard, with one major exception. Potential players would participate in an intuition test, which in reality was a version of the Gansfeld experiment, using Zener cards, an extrasensory perception or ESP test, where one participant would select a card and the other, in some state of sensory deprivation like a blindfold, would attempt to correctly guess and pick the same one for themselves. Though production would say that the helmet wearer was always selected randomly, the scores on this test are what truly decided it. Already, we can start to see that this show may have been more to the producers than just pure entertainment. They were running an experiment. Through these first slides, we also begin to see that there's more than meets the eye to this disc as well, with brief glitches and strange diagrams flashing on screen. Further explorations into the details of the contestants seems to confirm the hunch that the show's production was a front for some kind of psychological study. In the controversy section, we learn that Third Eye Pictures was supposedly introducing subtle mental suggestions to the contestants and implementing experimental elements to the game. There were a few mishaps. One version of the helmet, called Prototype 2, contained diodes which were supposed to detect and display the stress level of the wearer via a color-changing face on screen. In one episode, the face's skin began peeling away, leaving nothing but a skull, while the child wearing it began to cry uncontrollably. The only other confirmed incident occurred when the player was speaking to an NPC called the Jester, who we'll hear a lot more about later, and the contestant's nose began to bleed suddenly and severely. But perhaps the most unusual effect the show seemed to have on its contestants came from the very first children who ever played the game. The Bristol Kids, the contestants who played for the show's very first experimental pilot episode. Although they went into the show as academically average kids, after participating, their grades went up, and they went on to become massively talented in their fields. They were strangers when they met on the show and never kept up contact afterwards, only realizing that this had occurred to all of them when, mysteriously, they happened to attend the same mathematics conference. This unusual boost to academic performance hasn't been noted in any other contestants since, however. And the strange effects did not limit themselves to just the players. Many viewers reported unusual experiences as it related to the character Bertram, the dungeon master. Essentially the steward of the game. You know, the game master. He was the only cast member to stay consistent across all 8 seasons of the show. In the ending sequence of the show, he would stare down the camera in an oddly menacing way, something that viewers coined the Bertram stare. Some viewers reported this causing headaches and even fainting. Very strange. But Bertram was not the only character players would encounter in their journeys. Along with plenty of other allies and monsters in the castle, the throne room of the final boss fight held Lord Fear, the evil monarch at the center of the castle, along with Queen Nargal, who controlled the monsters, and the Jester. Huh. Odd. Investigating this Jester figure further, we can select the Jester incident, which takes us to what looks like a television in a dark room, broadcasting different staticky images of the Jester from various episodes. Now, I'll just get out ahead of this because I spent way too long searching for the answer myself. There is no code that you can use on this keypad. That's not like an ARG thing of me trying to get you to find it out for yourself. As far as I'm aware, all these buttons do is show different images of the Jester. I could be wrong, but I've yet to find anyone who's figured out some kind of big secret here. Still, something is clearly up with this Jester. Something happened that very well may have led to the end of the show. And outside of the fiction of the show, the production experienced unusually high cast turnover, and everyone from actors to production reported strange experiences. First and foremost, many of the members of the cast had trouble breaking character after the show was done. Most famously, though, nobody besides Bertram ever returned to play their roles for more than one episode. Most often, they cited catering issues, something in the meat. Were they being poisoned or in some other way experimented on by Third Eye Pictures? As players explored the castle, they would be met with a semi-random assortment of rooms of different types. Enigma rooms with puzzles, encounter rooms where they would meet some other friendly or hostile character, healing rooms to restore health points, rooms with bombs or traps to avoid. Others were a little more unique. Very rarely, players would stumble into a room with absolutely nothing inside. Though one might imagine these would act as a welcome respite, players never stayed for long. They reported everything from fear, regret, and most commonly, unbearable melancholia by being inside. They were eventually phased out due to this feedback, but would sometimes still appear during play for unknown reasons. Similarly, rooms where players had to avoid the attacks of a knight called Galahad would rarely appear as well. Galahad was of mysterious origin, a statue that appeared in the headquarters one day and began inserting itself into the game without production understanding how or why. Though typically it was harmless to the contestants in a real physical sense, its unknown origins and the staff's inability to actually control it were one of the reasons the show was eventually cancelled. Red rooms appeared as internal organs, like the player was wandering through the insides of some massive beast, and were eventually removed from the game after complaints about them appearing too gory. Green rooms had players rolling dice to decide what room would appear ahead. Only twice, this led to something called the Dark Place, which players reported causing them a deep existential dread that followed the rest of the way through the game. Blue rooms are probably the most unusual. They constituted almost a dimension in themselves, visions of surreal, brutalist architecture carrying with them a sense of profound sadness. Perhaps the strangest thing about this is how little we know about what the purpose or nature of the blue rooms were, as Jay's notes on the subject have disappeared. Additionally, there were rooms that seemed completely anomalous, such as the meat rooms and well rooms. Meat rooms were otherwise seemingly normal, in which some piece of scenery or prop was replaced with meat of different kinds. This was, again, something the staff had seemingly no involvement or knowledge of, and the problems the cast reported with catering cropped up soon after these began appearing. Similarly, well rooms would rarely occur when a well prop was designed for a specific room scenery. The prop would mysteriously mysteriously be replaced by a much more realistic well, and these more realistic wells would in fact begin appearing all over the set throughout the course of the game. There are a few more rooms briefly mentioned here, such as the aura rooms. Jay was obsessed with the concept of auras in Kirlian photography, and there was a brief period where some rooms had aura viewing cameras. There's a separate section here for entities, which covers things like monsters and the like, which for our purposes I don't need to discuss much of, except for the wall monsters. Massive heads of different shapes and appearances which would appear in the walls of some empty rooms with strange and erratic behavior. These were actually an intended part of the game, but there was one strange moment of note. In the Season 4 finale, an apparition of a face, at first mistaken for one of these wall monsters, appeared in the corner of a room, but production refutes ever placing it there. It was closer to a ghostly sighting than anything else. Through the player's journey inside the castle, they were sometimes given a choice of items they could bring along with them. The CD gives us a breakdown on all of them, and interestingly an analysis of what each choice of items said about the player's temperament and philosophy, but most interesting are the key and bone items. The key could be used to unlock a place called the Purple Dimension. After choosing the key, a well would appear in a nearby room. If the player descended into the well, they would find themselves in this dimension, a land of dreams. Exploring this strange forest, the player would come across all sorts of unusual things, a silent ferryman or doors of pure darkness. From the way this part is written, this place was not seemingly a regularly implemented part of the game, but instead some actual metaphysical plane which Jay was actively trying to map using the contestants exploring it via the game, before Network 7 Studios caught fire. We'll definitely be coming back to that event. The bone, on the other hand, signified players who had an almost disconcerting ability to move around and play the game, despite the helmet. The last slide of this section glitches and kicks us back to the menu, but not before we see what almost appears to be an emaciated corpse as the final image. Eerie. The experiment section of the CD is mostly broken. However, we are able to read a bit about Jay's fascination with remote viewing, specifically the CIA's research in the works of Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff, essentially experimenting with potential psychic abilities, in this case the ability to see things via out-of-body experiences. Jay's notes were filled with this stuff, something called the Oracle Project, which the authors of the ROM say could be related to Protocol 12. Whatever that means, we don't know. The final category on this disc is simply titled More, and gives us additional context as to what led up to the show's creation, this mysterious Jay person, as well as some miscellaneous information like spin-offs, merch, and the like. First and foremost, we follow the history of Jay, as he's known, as he's used various fake names throughout his life, and how he came to be making this television show. No records of his existence can be found before starting at Cambridge, studying psychology under the mentorship of Devon K. Despite being an incredibly talented student, he was generally unfriendly, eccentric, and took extra time to graduate as he spent most of his time in Devon K's lab, working on who knows what. Eventually, he gathered a small group of peers who started a student club called the Self Bureau, but every single member of the club's PhDs were turned down for unknown reasons, and the group left Cambridge to begin something called the Dream Clinic. No one is sure where the funding for this mysterious clinic came from, run by a group of technically not doctors, but they clearly made it work, paying patients to let them run dream and sleep-related experiments on them. When one patient suddenly began having unusual visions that they were able to replicate with the other patients, they focused their research there. They believed they had discovered some metaphysical dimension outside of regular space, accessed through the dreamscape. Though they began peacefully enough, as they would explore further, they would become more strange and mystical, and the patients would begin showing signs of tachycardia and nausea. Though some of the researchers began feeling uneasy about continuing down this route, they ultimately continued with one final experiment, where the patients were given anti-nausea medication. Entering through one of the mysterious doors that began appearing in this dreamscape, patients were greeted with nightmarish visions and trauma. They recall an abandoned house, a girl who would make wooden creaking sounds when she speaks, and one even encountered some spectral entity brandishing a large sword. At this point, all of the patients awoke, and never came back, some even fleeing in the middle of the night, leaving their belongings behind. A divide between those more cautious about their experiments and the Jay loyalists broke out, eventually turning to fisticuffs before Jay and his loyalists disappeared from the clinic, taking with them the remaining money. From there, Jay spent some time under the radar in Prague, reading everything he could find about dreams, eventually publishing a book of his own called Dreams: Transform Your Life Through Dreams, which seemingly focused on the topic of lucid dreaming. Almost immediately upon returning to the UK, Jay started work in television production, producing a wide variety of programs, many of which seem unremarkable, a few of which seem to carry a familiar dark electronic or spiritual theme. Ghost Train, The Computer Program, Terror Towers, and most noteworthy, Alias the Jester. Not only is there the obvious connection to the Jester from the show, but also Jay's use of many different aliases throughout his life. Additionally, using the funds from Maze Masters, Jay released multiple direct-to-VHS films via Third Eye Movies. All of them horror movies, strangely enough. As time went on, the movies became increasingly violent, with lots of focus on gore and meat as recurring themes. There's a subsection here about various theories as to what was really going on behind the scenes of Maze Masters, and though many of these we can't access, we are able to read about a few of them, or at least make a guess based on the title. Some believe Jay was having contestants unknowingly create tulpas, a concept from Tibetan Buddhism and is often discussed in New Age circles in relation to lucid dreaming and such, beings conjured from a person's pure thought. Others believe Jay was running a cult due to the group's spiritual subject matters, Jay's personal eccentricities, and the fact that many past members of this group seem afraid to speak out about their experiences. Titles like Indigo Children reference the New Age idea of children with more naturally developed empathy, intelligence, and even supernatural abilities. Maybe Jay was screening for indigo children and attempting to test them via the show. Finally, there's a section on shadow people, which is a pretty wide-ranging topic in the world of the paranormal, but here refers specifically to the many sightings of such figures, either by crew or showing up in the backgrounds of photographs. Some believe they were brought through when the contestants entered one of these dream-like dimensions, that this bridge between the planes opened the entities into our world. The rest is basically just various miscellaneous information, many of Jay's surviving psychology and supernatural books, drawings the contestants would make after participating, usually showing things like meat, blood, monsters, shadow people, and elements from the dreamscape dimensions, art, board game spin-offs, video game spin-offs including one called Gods of the Labyrinth, merchandise including many Goosebumps-style books which all eventually seem to focus entirely on the Jester. Oh god. The Network 7 page showing a distorted image of the building on fire, and the credits page. While this page seems unremarkable on the surface, there is one final secret hiding here, one that will take the most effort to uncover. Clicking on the link for the ROM creator's Contact Us page, it takes us to another gallery of images. Most of these just bug out briefly, but one, a familiar one, flashes a strange set of symbols on the screen and then takes us to another gallery of images. Now, exactly the nature of this puzzle, I'll be 100% honest, I'm not entirely sure of. Essentially, you're trying to pick out the correct image from the lineup, upon which you are sent the next set of images after being shown a brief series of symbols. My initial thought was that you have to select the image from the gallery that has already appeared in this ROM, which makes sense. It tests your memory and does appear to be how it functions at first, but the final few galleries definitely have more than one recurring image, so I'm not entirely sure how you're supposed to pick out which one to choose, but it was easy enough to brute force. If you have any ideas as to the logic behind the last few, definitely let me know. In any case, upon selecting all of the correct images, it still just boots you back to the credits page. This was just step one. We've been given the pieces of the puzzle, and now we have to fit them into place. Using these symbols that flash on screen between galleries, we can overlay them onto the screen as a kind of guide. Going back through the ROM's many pieces, we can find that the symbols line up with some pieces of the imagery on a particular slide, and the red dot denotes the area on the screen that you can click. Each one of these secretly clickable points leads you to a different version of your Windows 98 desktop with new information available. First, the dot located on the shadow people slide allows you to open the recycling bin to find that it's filled with a series of images. At first, what appears to just be maze masters behind the scenes, and as it evolves, begins showcasing more and more intense sleep experiments, until the final photo shows a subject covered in strange blue handprints. The next, in the David Rowe art section, allows you to view a CCTV.exe program. A series of cameras show you scenes from some facility, possibly the Network 7 studios when it was still running, but just as well could be the place where Jay has currently set up shop after disappearing. We see scenes of the night statue Galahad in containment, various unsettling rooms, visions of the purple dimension, a room with the helmet on the ground surrounded by blood, a hospital bed with blue blood and a straight-up brain nearby, and finally, the Jester in a padded cell. The dot that can be found when looking through Jay's various books will take you to a view of a monitor from the outside, itself running the Frontiers of the Mind disc on the theory section. Clicking on some of these images now gives you flashes of imagery seemingly related to that specific theory. Finally, the dot found in the Prague years takes us to a playable demo version of that video game adaptation of Maze Masters, Gods of the Labyrinth. It's a fairly simple choose-your-own-adventure point-and-click experience, where choosing the incorrect door leads near immediately to your death by various monsters. Upon navigating through this maze correctly, it takes you to what is ostensibly the ending cutscene. A cracked computer monitor fading through images of the dreamscape, purple vistas and indigo horizons, beaches and castles, and we're zooming out, the wreckage of this dying computer screen revealing itself as we end on an image of the Network 7 building, up in flames, and a child, a contestant adorned in the helmet, looking out across a sunset. The end.
Ah, so you found it. Good. Now, quickly, tell me what deeper essence you have discovered about it, and do so with haste. The creature is coming.
Some of you will have guessed by now, but this project isn't entirely original. It is based on the real-life UK television show Nightmare, which shares many details with this fictionalized version, from the premise of the game itself to the date of its airing, and of course the images themselves are screen caps, often edited, of the show itself. The David Rowe art page showcasing the artist behind the environments, that is actually the guy who made the art for Nightmare. The board and video games, aside from Gods of the Labyrinth, those are all edited versions of actual licensed tie-ins. It is such a creative and genuinely unique love letter to this old children's television show, and as always, I definitely suggest you go and download and experience it for yourself. Though I hit on the major beats, there are still plenty of secrets and details I haven't covered here, and the real joy of the experience is slowly investigating this ROM for yourself and uncovering all the strange little details about the show and its production. With that said, let's take a slightly more analytical look at the information we've been provided on this disc. First and foremost, I just want to say that I initially had planned to focus this video solely on Forbidden Solitaire, but when I remembered playing this project months ago and realized the parallels from the occult themes to the focus on the production of a dark fantasy media property in the 80s/90s, to the centering of a mysterious jester character, to the general odd goofiness that is infused with an almost B-horror movie direction in the best possible way, I simply had to make a video analyzing them together. As I said before, I am such a sucker for these kind of playable unfiction experiences, and I'm always looking for more projects like this. So if you have any suggestions of some lesser known ones like this, definitely leave them in the comments. As for Frontiers of the Mind specifically, the surface level is fairly straightforward. The enigmatic character of Jay became obsessed with the study of dreams, psychic abilities, and metaphysics, and after controversy following him and his group of acolytes in their more traditional experiments, they moved to the world of television and began incorporating their experiments in more subtle ways. It's also a decent way to continue funding said experiments. Specifically, this seems to be a way to focus on bringing out or screening for the psychic abilities he believes may be pronounced in some children, as we see with references to the indigo children concept. However, as they continue bridging the worlds of these various dimensions, unpredictable and even dangerous incidents begin piling up, from the meat to the shadow figures to issues with the contestants themselves, eventually ending in Network 7's studio burning to the ground. Whether this was the work of some entity that was brought over, or another case of Jay attempting to disappear and cover his tracks, is unclear. Generally, many of the specific details are obscured or left vague, and I think that's an intentional choice. The story is more about the mystery than it is about the answers. But I do think one of the more obvious questions the story posits is the nature of the Jester and Jay. There's clearly a connection between Jay and the Jester, made especially evident by the whole Alias the Jester show and Jay being known to change his name. And they both start with J. Again, I think this is left vague on purpose, but I believe it probably comes down to this idea introduced in the shadow figure section, which discussed a kind of duality to entering these dreamscapes, that by entering from our side, something enters from the other side too. And maybe this figure of the Jester is the otherworldly mirror to Jay. Jay's unknown history before showing up at Cambridge seems to imply he perhaps had a more direct connection to these metaphysical elements, perhaps being an indigo child himself, and this Jester character is his primary tie, his link to this mystical plane. And that leads me to what I think is a really intriguing thematic lens with which we can view this project. Much like Forbidden Solitaire, this story is really about creation. After all, this CD isn't about the television show itself as much as it is about the behind the scenes, about the process of making it. And in a very literal way, Jay's process of creation is about reaching out to the ether, to a plane unseen by the naked eye, using his television show, his art, as a vessel for something otherworldly. The act of creation is a communion with something magical, something beyond our understanding. And this is not an uncommon conceptualization for the process of creation in general, practicing creativity as a spiritual act, or as the universe or the muses speaking through you. Divine inspiration. It came to me in a dream. As much as this project is about strange supernatural experiments, it is about an eccentric artist creating something utterly unique through a connection with a higher plane. And I want to discuss this further in a moment, but first, I want to take a step back, take a wider look at this oddly specific subgenre of 90s dark fantasy unfiction CD-ROM games, focusing thematically on the development of the media itself.
Oh dear, the creature approaches. I must away. Escape! Thank goodness you escaped. Now, tell me, doesn't this all seem a little familiar?
Strangely enough, these games are not the first projects I've covered that fit into this category. More than 2 years ago now, I made a video about the Basilisk games from Kira. Unfiction games taking the form of an SNES cartridge and a CD-ROM of the dev kit for a Y2K dark fantasy RPG that was never finished, allowing you to fly around in the game engine to explore and discover the secrets left by the developers, mostly telling the story of the dark happenings and struggles of its development. It fits so well with Forbidden Solitaire and Frontiers of the Mind, I was honestly a little mad I had already made a video about it, when the trio of these projects together would have been so perfect. But I have already covered Basilisk in a lot of detail previously, so I will redirect you to that video here. Consider this one a kind of spiritual successor. And Basilisk isn't even the only project that fits certain similarities either. There's the Vermis guidebooks for a dark fantasy RPG that doesn't exist. And the question that I was left wondering looking at this peculiar genus of unfiction project was, why, in spite of the digital technological medium, is there such a focus on mysticism and magic? Not just ghosts, but curses and higher realms and wizardry. And in conjunction with that, why do they all focus so specifically on the creators of these projects, the specific themes of creativity and the eccentric minds behind the art? And I think it's because there is a lot to be said about the process of creation being magical or spiritual, not necessarily to any specific belief system, but from a purely experiential perspective, there is something very ineffable about art. You can pin down the tactile, physical things you're doing step by step, the paint, the brushes, the canvas, the techniques, But that doesn't seem to truly explain what it means or feels like to take a creative vision from your brain. Take a creative vision from your brain or multiple people's brains, a place where it doesn't exist except for in some unphysical other plane, and bring it into reality. It's like casting a spell. And this is obviously not just a me thing. In fact, I'm probably a little less spiritual than the average person, but it is something you hear about from artists all the time, that creativity is a kind of ritual where you connect with some higher source, again, all the way back to the muses of ancient Greece, that your ideas aren't necessarily your own, but that you are a vessel for them as they exist in the ether. You may have heard this idea from producer Rick Rubin, who calls this source fittingly the source. If you have an idea you're excited about and you don't bring it to life, it's not uncommon for the idea to find its voice through another maker. This isn't because the other artist stole your idea, but because the idea's time has come. But for me, this concept came to my attention most obviously in kind of a funny way via Rhett McLaughlin from Rhett and Link and Good Mythical Morning. And to be honest, they are some of the most creative people out here on the internet and have been for a long time, so when they talk about perspectives like this, I do take note of it.
But it's based on the idea that these ideas, these concepts exist outside of us. They are in the fabric of the universe, in the fabric of this existence, and we have the ability to tap into them. Not a new idea. They're these timeless truths and melodies and arrangements of ideas that existed that you can kind of tap into if you're a creative person. Mm-hmm. Now this sounds like serious LA woo-woo new age shit that I'm not into, right? But it is an interesting way to think about creativity. We just had an experience this past weekend with some creative people where this principle of someone's ability to tap into something that is definitely external, that is outside of them, was demonstrated in a really powerful way. And I was like, okay, all right, Mr. Skeptic.
And that concept is what kept coming back to me as I was digging deeper into how these stories' disparate elements converged. Their focus on the mystical and magical, and their more grounded realities of the game industry ethics and television production. That the process of creating the art is where those two things bridge and meet. Jay searches desperately for insight in the unknown, the otherworldly, the planes outside of his existence, and he finds the best medium for him to do so is by creating a television show, bringing together a group of artists and tradespeople and creating art. Lucas B. Hart is obsessed with bringing magic into the world, doing the impossible, and he sees art as his way to do that, a vision shared by Shannon Sierra, that the creation of art has an almost magical power, and in the case of that story, it's literal. But when Lucas allows the process of that creation to be corrupted by corporate exploitation due to his own shortcomings, it doesn't just make the art bad, it manifests in something literally cursed. A CD-ROM with a malevolent demon attached to it. If you've seen my Basilisk video, spoilers for that briefly, you'll know that as the game developers became more and more depressed, overworked, and bitter, very similar thematically with the team at Heartblade Interactive and Forbidden Solitaire, the outcome was the creation of a beast of pure malice, a being born of artists channeling pure hate and pain. These stories, in their own ways, are a cautionary tale. Art is something that is miraculous, magical even, and there's danger in that. You can put your heart and soul into something, and it can leave that art enchanted, or it can be cursed.
What a journey you've been on, traveler. Through the wastes, into the darkness, the darkest dungeon, and you made it out alive. But I do hope your adventuring days aren't over, Perhaps you'll be back again someday.
Thank you all for watching. Normally I have a little written thing here of my goodbye message, but I forgot to do that this time, so thank you all. Check out my Patreon. Thank you to the folks over at the Adventure Zone as well for sponsoring this video. And thank you, obviously, to my patrons for supporting the channel. And, yeah. Bye, I guess. Smile. Rah, rah, rah.
into reality. And it's scary and crazy, but kind of cool.